Ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin today by acknowledging something we all know, but maybe don't talk about enough. Life is hard. Sometimes it's hard in ways we never saw coming, and other times it's just the kind of hard that wears on your soul. But here's the truth I want to share with you today. Happiness is not a destination. It's a practice. I want to begin today acknowledging something we all know, but maybe don't talk about enough. Life is hard. Sometimes it's hard in ways we never saw coming. Sometimes it's a slow, grinding kind of hard that wears on your soul. The constant pressure of expectations, the weight of responsibilities, the loss, the heartbreaks, and the moments where we feel utterly alone. But here's the truth I want to share with you today. Happiness is not a destination, it's a practice. And if we don't practice it, if we don't make space for it in the midst of all the chaos, it won't just show up when we need it most. So let's talk about how we can start practicing happiness, no matter what life throws our way. I'm not talking about some kind of shallow, everything is fine mindset that we put on as a mask, especially in front of others. I'm talking about real, grounded, authentic happiness that doesn't crumble when the world does. True happiness is found in the depths of discomfort, vulnerability, and our willingness to connect with ourselves and others. You know, a few years ago, I found myself in a place where I had to get really honest with myself. Life had dealt me some unexpected blows, big ones that left me feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. I had a choice. I could either close off my heart to protect myself from more pain, or I could lean into the discomfort, be vulnerable, and let people see me as I truly was. Vulnerability terrified me. I thought it meant weakness, and I thought if I opened up, people would judge me, or worse, pity me. But I knew deep down that if I wanted real happiness, I couldn't keep pretending I had it all together. So I chose to lean into the discomfort. I started to show up vulnerable, raw, and unsure. And you know what happened? Something remarkable. I found connection. I found people who didn't just see me as the strong, put together person they thought I was. They saw me as human. They saw my flaws, my fears, my brokenness, and instead of pulling away, they leaned in. And in that shared vulnerability, something beautiful started to unfold. I found joy, not the kind of joy that comes from things going perfectly or everything being in place, but the kind of joy that comes from being truly seen and truly loved for exactly who I am. And that's the first step toward happiness, vulnerability. We spend so much of our lives hiding parts of ourselves from the world, afraid of being judged or rejected. But here's what I've learned. Vulnerability is the gateway to authentic connection. And connection is the first and most important ingredient to true happiness. If you're willing to show up as your authentic self, I wasn't just feeling overwhelmed, I was exhausted. And yet, one day I decided to try something. I began a daily gratitude practice, not the thankful for my health and my family kind, although those are important too, but the real, messy, unpolished gratitude. I started by acknowledging the small things that often go unnoticed, things that were still there, even in the midst of my struggles. I remember one morning in particular, sitting in my car, feeling like the world was too much to handle. And in that moment, I wrote down 3 things I was thankful for. They weren't grand gestures or profound moments. They were simple. The sound of my daughter's laughter, the warmth of the sun on my face, the comforting familiarity of the cup of coffee in my hand. It wasn't much, but it was enough. And that's the key to gratitude. It doesn't have to be perfect or extraordinary. It just has to be real. When we start practicing gratitude, we start to shift our perspective. We begin to see that even in the darkest times, there is always something to be thankful for. Gratitude doesn't erase the hard parts of life, but it gives you the ability to see beyond them. It invites joy back into your life, even when things aren't perfect. Gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's a practice. And when you make it a daily habit, it will guarantee more happiness, even in the most challenging of circumstances. Then there's the power of connection, something I can never overstate. I've come to realize that the deepest moments of happiness I've experienced in my life have always been tied to the people around me. It's the people who see us for who we truly are, who remind us of our worth when we forget. It's the people who hold us up when we can't hold ourselves together. But what's most surprising, at least to me, is that many of these connections were formed when I was at my lowest, when I thought I had nothing left to give. I remember a time when I felt so disconnected from the world, disconnected from myself even. I was going through something personal and deeply painful, and I couldn't see my way through it. But in the midst of all of that, I reached out. I didn't want to, but I did it anyway. I called a friend, I shared my fears and my pain, and something amazing happened. I wasn't judged. I wasn't told to fix it or get over it. Instead, I was met with understanding, with compassion, and with an open heart. Connection has a healing power. It makes us feel like we belong, like we matter, and like we are seen. When life feels heavy, it's easy to withdraw, to isolate, and to believe that no one will understand. But if you want to guarantee more happiness, you must make an effort to nurture the relationships that matter most. The ones where you can be yourself, flaws and all, and still feel loved. Those relationships are the foundation of your happiness. Don't let them go. Invest in them, nurture them, and let them remind you that you are not alone. And let's not forget about the setbacks, the ones we all face. Those moments when things fall apart, when everything seems to be going wrong. I've had my fair share of them. Moments when failure seemed like the only option, when I thought that the weight of the world would crush me. But here's the thing I've learned. Failure is not the end of happiness. It's actually a crucial part of the journey. I'll never forget a moment when I lost something I thought I couldn't live without. I was devastated, and for a long time I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But one day, as I looked back on that experience, I realized something. That loss, that struggle was teaching me something. It was shaping me, molding me into a more resilient, compassionate version of myself. What if we stopped seeing our setbacks as signs of defeat and instead viewed them as opportunities for growth? What if we allowed ourselves to see failure not as a roadblock, but as a stepping stone? That shift in perspective can make all the difference. When we reframe our struggles as opportunities for growth, happiness becomes less about our circumstances and more about our ability to rise, to learn, and to keep moving forward. And finally, the most powerful step of all, choosing courage over comfort. Oh, this one is a game changer. Because let's be real for a second, it's so much easier to stay in our comfort zone, to avoid the things that scare us, to keep playing small and safe. But here's the truth, happiness doesn't live in the comfort zone. It lives in the places where we are willing to step into the unknown, to take risks, and to try even when we're terrified. I know how scary it is to make that leap. I've stood at the edge of the cliff many times, with my heart pounding and my mind racing, asking myself, what if I fail? What if I fall? But I've learned that true happiness isn't found in the place where everything is predictable and controlled. It's found in the moments when we take that first step into uncertainty, into discomfort, into the unknown. So, here's the question I want to leave you with today. What is the one courageous thing you're going to do today to create more happiness in your life? It doesn't have to be grand, it just has to be brave. And that bravery, that willingness to step into discomfort, is what will unlock the joy you've been waiting for. There was a time in my life when I felt like everything was falling apart. It wasn't just the typical ups and downs, It was the kind of breakdown where you feel like you've been living your whole life on autopilot and suddenly the control panel is fried, being so overwhelmed that you can't even hear your own voice anymore. You start to believe that you're the only one in the world feeling that way. But here's the thing, life doesn't have to be perfect for us to feel gratitude. In fact, it's the moments that are far from perfect that often hold the seeds of joy and transformation. And that's where I started. I made a decision to begin each day with gratitude. And no, I'm not talking about some sort of count your blessings mantra, because that can feel like just another thing to check off your to-do list when you're already buried in it. I'm talking about real, raw, unapologetic gratitude for the little things. The things that often go unnoticed because we're too busy chasing something more or something bigger. I remember the first day I really practiced this. It wasn't easy, and I had to force myself to slow down, to be present. But I made a list. 3 things. Just 3. I forced myself to find something to be thankful for, even if my heart wasn't quite in it yet. One day, I wrote down the feeling of the cool air on my face as I walked outside, the way my child's laughter echoed through the house, the quiet moment when I wrapped myself in a blanket and let myself feel warmth. They weren't huge or life-altering things, but they were real. And the more I wrote, the more I realized something. Gratitude wasn't about ignoring the bad or pretending everything was okay. It was about finding the light in the dark corners of my life. It was about acknowledging that, even though I was struggling, there were still beautiful, meaningful things happening around me. Gratitude is the lens through which we can begin to shift our focus from everything that's wrong to everything that's right, even if it's just a tiny sliver of right. I started doing it every day, forcing myself to take a moment to appreciate the small things. At first, it was hard to find them and my list felt forced, but slowly it began to change. Over time, I noticed a subtle shift in my mindset. I began to notice more moments of joy. I felt more present. I was more aware of the good in my life, even though the challenges hadn't gone away. And little by little, that awareness started to add up. I think gratitude is one of the most underappreciated practices we have. It's easy to get caught in the cycle of I'll be happy when, or I'll be grateful when everything aligns, when life falls into place, when there's a moment of relief. But here's what I realized: happiness doesn't wait for everything to be perfect. It's found in the practice of gratitude, even when things are hard. It's about shifting your focus, taking your attention away from the chaos, the worry, the things that are out of your control, and placing it on the beauty that still exists, even in the midst of the mess. There was a turning point for me, though. I had gotten into this rhythm of gratitude, and things started to shift. But it wasn't until I really started to embody it, to live it in my bones, that I saw just how powerful it could be. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk feeling completely drained. I was buried in work, feeling disconnected from everything around me. And then I stopped, closed my eyes, and remembered my practice. I remembered the tiny moments of joy that were always there, waiting for me to notice them. In that moment, I realized how much I had been overlooking in my hurry to just get through the day. I looked outside at the trees swaying in the wind and remembered how beautiful that sight was when I first moved to the area. I thought about the laughter of my kids, which I had become so numb to because I was always focused on what was next. I felt the soft hum of my favorite song in the background and remembered how comforting it was, how much it soothed me when I was younger. And in that quiet moment, I felt a wave of peace wash over me. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. In that space, I realized that joy had been waiting for me all along, hidden beneath the surface of my everyday life. Gratitude, I discovered, is a way of unlocking joy that's already there. It's not about creating happiness from nothing. It's about noticing what's already present and allowing it to breathe. It's about noticing how full your cup actually is, even if it's not overflowing. It's about turning your attention to what is going right in your life instead of what isn't. And trust me, when you begin to do that, you'll find that happiness is not a distant thing that only comes when everything is perfect. It's a practice, a choice, and it's something you can tap into every single day. The most powerful thing about gratitude, in my experience, is that it's something we can practice right now, in this very moment. It doesn't require us to wait for a perfect situation or a miracle. It doesn't require our circumstances to change for us to experience joy. We have the ability to choose gratitude at any point in our day. Whether it's as simple as noticing the warmth of the sun on your face or appreciating the quiet moment with your favorite cup of tea, you can find something to be grateful for. And when you do, you will see that even on your toughest days, there is always something worth celebrating, something that reminds you that happiness doesn't have to wait. It's already here, waiting to be noticed. And so when life feels hard, when things feel heavy, when you feel like you're lost in a sea of uncertainty, remember, happiness doesn't require perfection. It simply requires presence. The ability to be present with the mess alone. Our happiness doesn't come from isolation or independence, but from connection. Connection is the bridge between our hearts and the world. It's the lifeline that pulls us out of our darkest moments and into the light. And without it, we can feel lost, adrift in a sea of expectations and pressures that don't allow us to truly breathe. When life gets overwhelming, we often retreat inward. It's easier to shut people out, to protect ourselves from more pain. But in that isolation, we only deepen our sense of disconnection. We forget that we are not meant to carry the weight of the world alone. I've learned that the most profound experiences of happiness I've had have been in the presence of those who have chosen to walk alongside me in both my brightest and darkest days. I think about a time when I felt completely disconnected from the world. I had just gone through a particularly challenging period of my life. It was like everything I had built had crumbled overnight, and I was left standing in the wreckage, unsure of who I was or what I was doing. I thought I could handle it all on my own. I thought I could keep it together. I could put on the brave face, give everyone else the appearance of strength, and keep trudging along. But eventually it all caught up with me. I couldn't carry it anymore. I was tired, drained, and I felt utterly disconnected from everything around me. And in the midst of all that, a friend reached out to me. It wasn't some grand gesture. There was no dramatic moment. She simply called, asked how I was, and listened. And then something unexpected happened. I felt seen. Not for my achievements, not for what I was trying to portray to the world, but for who I truly was. The raw, unfiltered version of myself. And in that moment, I realized that I had been so busy trying to hold it all together that I had forgotten the most important thing. We are meant to share the load. We are meant to be seen, to be heard, and to allow others to share in our joys and our struggles. Connection is what gives us the strength to keep going. It's the reason we don't have to face life alone, no matter how hard it gets. There's a particular kind of joy that comes from being able to share ourselves fully with others. And I don't just mean sharing the good stuff. I'm talking about sharing the parts of ourselves we often try to hide, the struggles, the fears, the doubts, and the mess. There's something deeply healing about having someone hear your story, not with judgment, but with empathy and understanding. And I don't think that healing is just for the person doing the listening. It's also for the person doing the sharing. When we open up to others, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create a space where joy can grow, joy born of acceptance, joy born of being loved as we are. But it's not just about receiving connection, it's about giving it too. I've learned that happiness is a two-way street. We don't just receive the gifts of connection from others, we also give them. There's something profoundly powerful about being there for someone else, even when you don't have all the answers. It's in those moments when we sit with someone else in their pain or joy, simply offering our presence, that we often experience the deepest forms of happiness. In those moments, we are reminded that we are part of something greater, that our lives have meaning because of the way we touch the lives of others. True happiness is built on a foundation of shared connection. And as we move through life, we come to realize that the connections we nurture, whether they're with family, friends, or even strangers, are what keep us grounded. They are the anchors that prevent us from drifting too far away from the things that truly matter. The beauty of these relationships is that they don't need to be perfect to be meaningful. They don't need to be free of conflict or struggle to be real. It's in the messy moments, the moments when we are vulnerable, when we are struggling, when we don't have it all figured out, that the most profound connections are made. Connection doesn't require perfection, it requires authenticity. I think about the friendships that have meant the most to me, the ones that have been tested by time, by distance, by life's inevitable ups and downs. These are the friendships where we can pick up right where we left off, no matter how much time has passed, no matter how much life has changed. These are the relationships where I can share my rawest emotions without fear of judgment, knowing that I will be met with empathy and love. In those relationships, joy is a natural byproduct. It's the joy of knowing that we are not alone, that we are seen and understood for exactly who we are. But beyond these deep friendships, I've also come to appreciate the fleeting connections we make with others. The strangers who share a smile, the acquaintances who offer a word of encouragement, the brief but meaningful exchanges that remind us that we are all in this together. These connections, no matter how brief, are a reminder that our happiness isn't something we create in isolation. It's something that happens when we open ourselves up to others. It's something that flourishes when we see each other, when we acknowledge each other's humanity, and when we allow ourselves to be part of a larger whole. When you think about it, happiness isn't about keeping everything to yourself. It's about opening up, allowing others in, and letting yourself be a part of the beautiful, messy tapestry of human life. And that means showing up vulnerable, real, and present for both the people who are closest to you and for the ones who cross your path, even if only for a moment. Connection of reach. We all face moments when things fall apart. We've all experienced failure in some form, whether big or small, public or private. And let's be honest, failure stings. It's uncomfortable. It feels like a personal indictment, a sign that we are not enough. But here's something I've learned along the way: failure is not the end of the story. It's a part of the process. It's an opportunity to reframe our understanding of success, and it's a crucial ingredient in our happiness. I'll never forget a time when I was faced with a significant professional failure. I had put my heart and soul into a project, one that I believed in deeply. I was invested. I had visions of success, of how this project would not only transform my career, but also positively impact others. I poured countless hours into it, sacrificed personal time, and was certain that it was going to work. But when it finally launched, it didn't succeed the way I'd hoped. It faltered. It didn't garner the attention I expected. And it was one of the most crushing moments of my professional life. I felt like I had failed not just in my work, but as a person. In that moment, I wanted to hide, to retreat, to pretend it didn't matter. I thought about all the ways I could explain the failure to others, trying to shield myself from their judgment. But something shifted in me. Instead of closing myself off, I leaned into it. I gave myself permission to feel the sting, to process the disappointment, but I refused to let it define me. Failure, I realized, was not a reflection of my worth. It was simply a moment in time, a single experience in a long journey. And if I allowed that failure to shape my entire narrative, I would miss out on all the lessons it had to offer. I took a step back and reassessed. Instead of seeing this as a defeat, I started to see it as an opportunity to grow. What could I learn from this? What did I need to change? What was this failure trying to teach me? It was through that process of reflection and reevaluation that I began to understand the value of failure, not as a judgment of who I am, but as a necessary part of the journey to becoming who I am meant to be. Failure is not something to fear. It is a powerful tool for growth. You see, failure is where resilience is born. It's where our true character is tested and where we discover our capacity to rise again. It's easy to be happy when everything is going well, when things are clicking, when success is flowing easily. But real happiness, the kind of happiness that doesn't fade with the next challenge or disappointment, is built in the trenches of failure. It's in the moments when we get knocked down but decide to get back up. When we take what we've learned from the experience and apply it to the next challenge, knowing that we are stronger, wiser, and more capable because of the failure we just endured. I had to learn that success isn't just about achieving the goal. It's about what happens in the process. The setbacks, the stumbles, the lessons, they all contribute to the person you become in the end. If we stop at failure, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to evolve. I realized that happiness doesn't live in the end result, it lives in the willingness to keep going, to keep learning, and to keep trying, no matter how many times we fall. The truth is, when we stop fearing failure, we start to see it differently. We see it as a teacher, not a judge. We see it as a part of the human experience, a necessary step on the path to growth. And when we embrace failure in this way, it loses its power to paralyze us. Instead, it becomes a source of strength, a source of inspiration. I learned that each failure is simply one step closer to success. The more we embrace failure as part of our journey, the less power it has to stop us. What if we began to celebrate our failures as milestones? What if we reframed them not as something to hide or ignore, but as stepping stones to something better? When we can find joy in the process, even when it's hard, we unlock a deeper sense of fulfillment, the kind of fulfillment that comes from knowing we are doing the work, showing up, and refusing to give up on ourselves. Think about the people you admire most in life, the ones who seem to have it all together, who've achieved incredible things. Now, I can almost guarantee that they didn't get there without encountering failure. They didn't rise to the top by avoiding mistakes or setbacks. They got there by learning from every misstep, by getting back up each time they were knocked down, by refusing to let failure be the final word in their story. When we look at failure through this lens, we begin to understand that it is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of courage. Courage is not the absence of fear or failure, it's the decision to keep moving forward despite them. When we embrace this kind of courage, we unlock a kind of happiness that is grounded in self-trust, in the belief that no matter how many times we stumble, we have what it takes to rise again. And this is the kind of happiness that is unshakable. This is the kind of happiness that endures. Failure has a way of shaping us, of showing us parts of ourselves we might never have discovered otherwise. It pushes us to grow in ways success never could. It forces us to confront our limitations and move past them, to see what we're truly made of. And in that process of transformation, we find a deeper, more resilient happiness, a happiness that isn't fragile or fleeting, but rooted in the unwavering belief that no setback can define us, no failure can hold us down. So the next time you face failure, as hard as it may be, but life will always throw curveballs at us. I know, because it's happened to me more times than I can count. Sometimes these curveballs come out of nowhere, knocking us off balance, challenging everything we thought we knew. There was a time in my life when this truth was one I resisted. But life doesn't work that way, and it was through the process of letting go that I began to find a deeper, more enduring happiness. There was a season in my life when everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. I was juggling too many things at once: work, relationships, family obligations, and no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to be enough. I would wake up every day with a checklist a mile long, thinking that if I could just get through it all, everything would fall into place. But no matter how much I did, there was always something else that needed my attention, always something else that wasn't going according to plan. It was exhausting. The more I tried to control everything, the more overwhelmed I felt. I realized I was burning myself out, trying to manage all the external forces in my life, and in doing so, I was losing touch with what truly mattered. That was when I started to understand a very powerful lesson. The more we try to control the things we can't, the more we resist the flow of life itself. Control is an illusion. It's a false sense of security that promises peace, but delivers stress and frustration. I began to see that true happiness didn't come from managing every little detail, it came from surrendering to what is. It came from letting go of the belief that I could control every outcome, and instead, learning how to trust the process of life, even when it didn't look like I had planned. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. I had to actively choose to loosen my grip, to stop trying to predict every twist and turn. I remember one day feeling particularly overwhelmed by a situation I couldn't control. It involved a major change in my life, one that would impact not just me, but the people I loved. I had spent days worrying about all the possible outcomes, trying to figure out what would happen next, how I could manage it, what I could do to fix everything. And in the middle of that, I had a breakthrough. I realized that I couldn't control the outcome no matter how hard I tried. So I stopped. I let go. I made a conscious decision to stop worrying about the future and instead focus on what I could do in the present moment to be okay. That's when I experienced something incredible peace, not because the situation magically solved itself, but because I stopped fighting against it. I stopped holding on so tightly. I stopped exhausting myself with the what ifs and how can I fix this, and simply let things unfold. I made room for myself to feel whatever I was feeling without needing to change it immediately. I gave myself permission to sit with uncertainty and trust that life would take me where I needed to go, even if it wasn't exactly how I imagined it would look. That's when I started to see that happiness doesn't lie in having control over every aspect of life. It lies in the acceptance that life is unpredictable, messy, and sometimes downright unfair. But it's also beautiful, full of surprises, and often it's those surprises that lead us to the greatest moments of growth and joy. The ability to find peace in the unknown is a practice. It's a choice we make each day. Instead of focusing on how we can control the future, we focus on how we can be present in the moment, accepting whatever comes our way with grace and open arms. This shift in mindset didn't mean I stopped planning or setting goals. It simply meant that I allowed myself to be flexible, to adapt when things didn't go as expected. I began to embrace the flow of life, knowing that when we stop fighting against the current, we can ride it with more ease. This allowed me to step away from the constant cycle of stress and fear and find more space for joy, peace, and contentment. When I stopped trying to control everything, I began to feel like I had more room to breathe, more space to simply be. I learned that happiness isn't found in perfection or in the ability to control our circumstances. It's found in the way we react to those circumstances. It's found in the grace with which we handle the unexpected. It's found in how we choose to show up for ourselves, no matter what life throws our way. When we release the need to control, we open ourselves up to the possibility of true peace. And in that peace, happiness flourishes.